Hello and welcome to Holding the Space. I'm Lisa May Young. I'd like to welcome Ronnie Marshall of Byron Hairdressing and Domenico of Migele Expedia. Welcome to Holding the Space, guys. Now, we met outside Cupcake Coffee Box on a Saturday morning a couple of weeks ago, and I was very aware of what you were doing during lockdown. Am I right in saying that you two have known each other for quite a long time?
Yeah, a very long time. I first met Dom at the Edinburgh Playhouse in 1984, I think it was, at a Simple Minds concert. Now, I kind of picked up the ticket last minute from friends, so I was actually sitting on my own. They were sitting further down, and there was these two guys sitting next to me, and I had a programme that was in the pocket of my jacket, and the next minute, you know, this guy who had cut black curly hair at the time, right, turned round and took the programme out of my pocket. Right, so, and
yeah,
can I have a read of your programme now? Yes, so it turned out it was Dom, which I then discovered probably about a year later when I then went for an interview in the salon.
Can I ask, did you keep the programme or did you return it?
I would say is that he's the archive guy. He knows all the dates. I'm no good with any years. Do you know what I mean? I struggle to think about time. But he's got it all and he remembers all these details, which is quite impressive. I'm always impressed and amazed when he comes. So I'm letting him.
Yeah. So then, I got a job with Dom and then learned masses, during the time that, I worked with them. And I realised that a lot of the things that Dom was passionate about, were the things that I learned to be passionate about and things that I really cared about. And I've gone and opened up my own business, but fortunately we've still remained, really, really close friends, all the way through.
Probably got closer.
At the point that Ronnie walks through the door for an interview, how long had you been in business at that point?
Ronnie, you're the archive man. Let me see.
I started working with you in 1985.
And I started in business in 1972. So that was, had I been in business 13 years then?
Yeah, you would have been. I don't know how long you were in. I first started working for Dom when he had a salon in Pachuca in Glennorth East. And it used to be a neon sign that said Don Migele Hero, but Hero in the window. And I remember it was one of those things, right? I used to pass by on the bus and I used to think, I want to go and work there. That's where I want to go, to be in the place that I'm in now. I want to go and work there. And it's amazing how these things end up happening.
That my wife, who he's equally a friend of it, but my wife had been going down to the Glenwood Centre in the salon that he worked in Glennorth. Do you know there's a boy down there? We should approach him about a job. And she was more keen than I. Not that I wasn't keen. I didn't relate to the fact that he was the guy I met in the Playhouse. I didn't know that. He informed me of that later.
Yeah.
I used to, at the time, I bothered him because I said I wasn't very keen to take him on first because he was dressed like a baker.
I was going through a phase that year of wearing lots of white stuff, so I had white t-shirts and white trousers, and I think I even had red slip-on shoes, which wasn't a good look.
Did you have the hat as well?
I didn't have a hat.
No, he's never been a hat man.
No.
I'm the hat man. Even when I had hair, but he has never been a hat man.
But it was a time that people talk about things that shape their life. And that probably was a real time for me that shaped my life because the kind of hairdressing and things that I was imagining having, I wasn't, but in no disrespect to the first salon that I worked in, but that wasn't really the kind of stuff I really wanted to do. And, then moving and working for Dom, I realised then that all those things I'd been thinking about were available and were happening and I was getting opportunities
to do it. And I think what was happening there was we were getting very, very excited. When Ronnie arrived, there was people there, Derek was already there, and we were very excited and he got involved in that excitement. And we would work on things till 10 or 11 at night. It never bothered us because it was our hobby. It probably still is, but that was a very, very exciting time. We were breaking ground then, weren't we? We were doing some ugly things to get to beautiful things, weren't we?
Yeah. So if I said it, because you're describing it as a hobby, but if I said it was a passion for both of you.
Oh, it was a passion. It was a passionate hobby. You know, all I mean is, it wasn't work to us.
It wasn't.
It wasn't work.
Well, we were doing our work during the day, and then staying late to start practicing on different things, and there was mad things that happened. It was really experimental, and photographically and things as well. You know, now it's all super glossy and things.
Everything was raw.
Know, but it was really raw, and we were using girls that were just letting us cut their hair and do things.
And then what happened was, because, you know, when you're looking at things like photographs and that, you've got budgets to set. I had started doing photographs myself, and therefore Ronnie might say, I've got a model, we'll photograph, and we just did it.
I know.
Do you know, we had our studio, because when we went to Tollbooth Street, we had the bit upstairs. It was just...
It was great.
Sometimes you couldn't breathe because it was so exciting.
Is there a part of it that's, because I'm wondering about your both your creative processes. Is it like almost like you've got a picture in your head and you're trying to...
Well, we would use things like, we would use tear sheets, so it was important to read to get the right references.
I think back then, you know, because we, you know, by this time we'd kind of progressed to sort of like the late 80s. Like we were, you know, when all this was happening, well, Dom was doing it obviously before that came along, but when I'd probably been with Dom about a year before, I really got heavily involved in all the photographic
and he got more into he came into it being the colour man, really. He at the times, he just kind of developed, didn't it? He was a colour specialist. He wasn't called a colourist, but that's what happened. But he was still doing hair as well.
But I think, you know, then you had to really, we didn't have, you know, computers, we didn't have the internet, so, you know, where you could just click a button, you know, and get the information. We had to physically go out, either like buying magazines, which you spent an absolute fortune on. Dom used to go to like the International Book Shop, newsagent, the International Newsagent in Edinburgh, and bought all the like Italian Vogue and everything, and you'd come back and you would look at it and dissect it and talk about it and try to imagine how they got the results that they got, and then that was kind of where we kind of practiced and things like that. And it was all physical, mood boards and things like that.
Another thing that it was very much was about sharing. It wasn't about, I'm keeping everything to myself and I'm not going to tell that guy about it. The minute you had an idea, I'm running to him or somebody else in the team, and you do the same and say, look, I've been looking at this, and boom, boom, boom. Do you know what I mean? And that's where that thing comes about, why it's important to continue to share knowledge through training and that. We're not, and that's something we've got very much in common, that stayed with us, we're not selfish with our knowledge and our experience. As far as I'm concerned, we're here at this stage to give, do you know, and I'm not trying to sound noble when I say that or anything like that. That is just how we were then and how we are now.
That must have been a really exciting atmosphere to work in. Feeling so free that you could express your ideas.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously
it was like being in a band.
Aye, it was, and we were. You had things to conform to during the day because you were keeping your clients happy, you know. So the work was commercial and things for the day, but then a lot of the experiments and things that happened at night sometimes filtered back through with certain clients during the day as well. But part of that, and it probably was a time where people were wanting to be more individual in the way that they looked, whereas I think now people have got this kind of
tribe.
Yeah, you know that you know, and I suppose we had a tribe. There was a group of people that were going about experiment and wanting to look different, and they wanted to be as different as they could be from the next, you know, from the next person. We were part of that, being involved in that, whereas now I think everybody kind of, there's a set look and everybody wants to follow.
But I think sometimes we would do things that were a bit risky. Even the way we dressed, we'd do things that maybe made us look like I remember when I had hair and I got it, and maybe I think it was you that did it, cut into a short bob and put wee round glasses on, and some people on the bad side might say you look like Woody Allen. But you just had an idea in your mind, and you didn't just do it on other people, you kind of lived it yourself.
Aye.
See what I mean?
It sounds quite fearless.
That's a good way of describing it. Fearless. That is a good way of describing it.
I think it was probably a time where you were always looking at the there was always the next thing.
That's right.
You know, it was always like the next thing. We would, you know, you would
sometimes
do something
we moved too quickly.
Things got thrown away because you thought, oh, I've done that.
So maybe we should have developed it more, you know, because it's a bit like a laboratory. And at the time, our reference would be other salons, and at that time mainly Sassoons, and we're still very, you still get excited about Sassoons. We'll go to London together and go to a Sassoon show, right? But you went to Sassoons in London, and it was like a laboratory, because sometimes girls came out and they'd almost look ugly, and the hair would be ugly, and you would know that when you went back, clients wouldn't want that. But from that idea, you'd make it sweeter. And then, you know.
So you'd almost like making it a builder's tea.
Yeah,
For your clients here.
And I think what was happening was the team were all getting the things that you were working on, so they were kind of like the adverts.
That's right.
They were like the adverts, so they'd be
right.
walking about with that kind of hair, and it made clients aspire to have that, or
right.
you know, or it was a way that we were able to communicate an idea to, you know, to our clients.
Do you still have that experience now of this experimenting, or has it changed somewhat, or?
It's different now. It's very different, because I think we live in this glossier world where everybody's got aspirations to look like the latest sort of influencer on Instagram or whatever. So in a way they're almost...
And do you know, think that there is this thing where lots of girls want to look sexy. Now at that time we were making girls look sexy, but it wasn't always a glossy sexy.
No, it was
individual.
It was individual, yeah. It was individual, and it was probably a bit edgier, because I think then girls wanted to look very individual, whereas I think girls now have got a role model, and they all want to kind of influence by that, and that's what they want to look like. And I suppose it was the same then, but they were different role models, I suppose.
And I think another thing is, for us, at the root of it all, apart from colour, was the haircut. And that has proved challenging in the last few years, because women or girls all want to have longer hair. And we keep hoping for that time that the tide turns, and I'm quite confident it will, but it's taken a long time.
I think in recent years it's become much more about
dressing
the hair, rather than about it being the haircut.
Okay.
You know, it's much, you know, a lot more. In colour is a big thing again. You know, there's probably a lot more colour happening, more creative colour than maybe when, you know, like in the 80s and things, where it was much more about, there was still creative colour, but there was a lot of cutting. You know, back then. It is just very different, but I think when you look at a young generation of hairdressers, they're equally as excited now about what they're doing as what we were
I think they are.
then. Yeah.
I wonder sometimes if they're as excited as we were, and that's not a complaint, but I don't know if they're excited. And you know what? How could I put it? I wish they were. I wish they could step into that. And we always... You know, I didn't know exactly what Ronnie's communicating to his trainees, but I'm sure it's similar to what we are, and we're trying to create situations within our salons that evoke excitement, and it's quite hard work. It's quite hard work. That doesn't mean we'll ever give that up. In fact, we'll just keep trying different ways. I mean, what we spend, on training for ourselves when we go away, or for our teams, is quite a lot. You know, it's thousands. that never ends, because the minute that ends, the development ends. But you know, we've been talking a lot over the lockdown, and one of the things we started talking about was maybe sharing the expense of bringing artists to us rather than us going to artists, and then all our teams would benefit from that. And then of course Ronnie goes away and develops it his way, and I'll go away and develop it my way. But that just makes sense, working together rather than against each other, although we've never worked against each other. All I'm saying is we've talked more about working more closely and more economically, intelligently, whatever way you want to take it.
You've spoken very much about the environments that you work in. How has that been for you, trying to develop that in your own salon? I get the sense it's almost like a culture.
A culture is exactly the way we would put it. Yeah. That is the term, because at the end of the day, what is a culture? It's the way we do things here. So, but there has to be a way. Whatever the way is, there has to be a way. If there isn't a way, you've got a whole different ballgame. And that is why I believe my way would be that I have employed staff. Because if I have employed staff, I can mould the culture. Whereas if I do not have employed staff, it doesn't mean that there won't be a culture, because I could think of organisations throughout the country where they still seem to have a culture, or at least that's what comes over social media. But they are not employed staff. But I think it's more challenging if you don't have employed staff to create that culture.
For me, I suppose the culture I knew, I've sort of worked in 2 salons before they opened my own, and the very first salon I was there just a few years as a trainee. And
3 salons you worked in before you won.
3.
Oh, you wherever you worked in one.
Are you forgetting your CV, Ronnie?
Well, I worked in for the week. That's one I would rather just put. Like, but you see, there's a story, because I, worked for Dom and then decided that I needed to move to Edinburgh for whatever reason. Don't ask me why, but I did, and it lasted a week, because the culture of that salon was not what I was used to. And fortunately enough, I got my job back, and I came back to Dom again.
That's because I stood outside the salon door.
We're saying, please come back, Ronnie.
But I think that whole thing about culture. So I suppose when I left Dom and opened up my own place, I was probably taking the culture that I was very used to and that I was very happy with. And then I suppose we've grown and changed and developed our cultures over the years, and I suppose it changes with, I suppose our culture stays the same, but it's changed with what's happening around us as well.
I think another thing that we've got in common is our culture, and you do get this at Sassoons very much, is based on discipline. And we're talking about self-discipline, but a discipline within the team. We're not wanting people walking in an hour late and we just say, it's fine. Or people walking in grubby and it's fine. It comes back to standards. That discipline is important. At Sassoons it was like that, and that discipline is in our work, particularly in haircutting again, where it's very, very disciplined in every attention to detail. And that's really part of that.
And I think it's communication as well. I think the only way that a culture can really happen is through communication and through everybody knowing exactly what is expected of them, and the way that things are, the way that we do things. People need to really understand it.
That's right.
And I suppose believe it as well. You can't do something if you don't believe in it.
You're not invested.
No, exactly. You have to be invested in it. So I suppose that's something that is a continual process.
Correct.
Letting being invested in you, I suppose.
I think the challenge during lockdown and coming back now with our sort of temporary setups is the fact that communication is challenged to a degree. Do you know?
Yeah.
Because we have, and I know Ronnie has this as well, review meetings.
Which everyone loves.
Regularly. Well, I would like to, I never get anybody concerned about coming in for a review meeting. because there's praise there as well. But then we've got our team meetings and just different. There's our buzz meetings. We have that every 2 weeks. You've got your weekly buzz type meetings, team meetings. There's the review meetings. Normally we start a day, whether this will still continue, we used to start a day with a huddle for 10 minutes. But either way, we've both got these communications that's very, very important. And that's kind of been stunted at the moment.
Yeah, because we're trying to
although, even in lockdown, both of us used Zoom.
Yeah.
But it's not quite the same. You've got to do it. You've got to do it, and I think there'll be a lot of that going forward. But it's just social distancing. We're forced to do that.
So if I said you were both very much wanted to set the tone within your home, if you like, because I do get this feeling that, or certainly this sense that your salons are very much, this is our house, and this is our creative place.
Well,
this is where
we probably spend more time in the in the salon than we do in the house. Certainly at this moment in time, especially. Yeah. But we probably spend equal amounts of time, in the salon. And it probably maybe does sound a bit cheesy, but the team are family. They are your family, and I think we're involved in leading and directing and nurturing and developing.
I agree that they're our family, and maybe it's because of as you get older, I probably think about them as being not my children, but maybe my nieces and things like that. When we were together, our age differences aren't as great, and therefore we became friends. We can be friendly with our team, but it's difficult to become friends.
Yes.
Because there is that professional.
Because of the different generation.
It is, absolutely. And I think, I suppose, it's a bit like, you want to nurture and develop people, and you want to be friendly and you want to be approachable, but
distance is
important. But there still has to be that, because, well, whether we say it or not, we are the boss or the leader.
Right.
Buck stops for the both.
Yes. So I think it's about balance, I suppose.
It is balance.
I think it's about having the right balance so that people feel comfortable and feel they can talk and discuss things with you, not feel any fear whatsoever, but also know that you're there to coach and guide and to take responsibility. Also, you're also teaching them to be responsible.
I think it's a funny thing as we sit here and chat that it's easy because we do. It's in situations like this I realise that we do think a lot the same, and it isn't a case of one trying to come across with more than another. It's honest, it's sincere, and sometimes I think sincerity, in a sense, is like a pathway to getting more clarity, because oftentimes, particularly in our industry, and I think this happened a lot more in the 70s and 80s, there was a lot of fake. Do there wasn't a sincerity, it was more one-upmanship all the time. So that's something that I think now I much prefer in our industry than it was years ago. You've got the social media fake, right, as we've talked about. In general, I know that both of us have got mutual friends who are hairdressers, and they're genuinely nice people.
Yeah, they are.
Whereas when we think about years ago, there was a lot of not very nice people. So that's a positive thing.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the way you're speaking, I do get the sense that these cultures within your salons, you're very given, the pair of you, in terms of the investment that you're offering to your community, to the person that's walking along the high street that feels great after they've had their hair done, to the staff member that's working there.
I think it's really important to give, we've got clients who are coming to us and are and are giving to us because they're our clients. But I think it's important that we give back to them, and I think it's about giving back to our community and all of those kinds of things. I think it's got to be yeah, it's maybe not something I could give a clear answer to, because I
I
suppose
know what
it's
you
just
mean,
something that actually happens. You know, we just do. You know, we just do it. You know, just the same as I could.
I think it's important to do it because it's right, and do it because that's how you are, rather than do it because you're going to get publicity from it, or do it because, you know, it's like, maybe this is a bit controversial. I think we spoke of it during the lockdown, but one of the things is, if you remember the situation, and it's a programme that I've never, Love Island. And remember that beautiful girl, I'd never seen her before this, right? Who unfortunately died.
Caroline Flack. Yeah.
And then suddenly, after that, all of this stuff came on social media about kindness, and actually I couldn't get that. In fact, in some ways I found it a bit disrespectful to the true sentiment of kindness. When did kindness become a trendy thing?
Fashionable.
Surely we should all be kind. Generally, it's not a trendy thing.
I know, and I think in that case, you know, that was all over social media that weekend. Then 2 weeks later, people were criticising people on social media the same. So what happened?
Because they were going to supermarkets and buying up all the toilet paper. You know what I mean? No, so what happened to kindness then?
Yeah, exactly. In terms of lockdown, I wonder what that was like for you, because Nicola gets up and it stops. That's it. You need to shut the doors. What was that like for the pair of you?
He's more sentimental than me.
Yeah, I decided on the Saturday that we were going to close, and Dom and I had spoken to each other that day, like you know what was happening. You know, so we spoke, and then I decided that day I drove along to the salon because I'd finished a bit earlier, so I went, you know, back, and I chatted with everybody and said that we were going to close. I do get choked up at this. So anyway, we were going to close, and I reminded everybody that, you know, have faith, we will be opening again. Now at that time I thought that we were maybe only going to be closed 3 weeks or something.
Yeah.
That, you know, never in my wildest dreams did I think we were going to be closed. I don't think either of us thought we were going to be closed for 4 months.
No.
So then everybody went away. I closed the salon doors, had a complete meltdown, because I was like thinking, what the hell, right? At which point the cleaner, who comes on a Saturday, who I didn't realise, opened the door and saw me in a complete state, right? So I think initially that thought of there was a feeling of fear and a feeling of the unknown, and thinking, are we going to be able to open again? And that was something that I just kind of thought inside. It certainly wasn't what I delivered to the rest of the team, because we were going to open again. And in terms of there was that feeling, that unknown, uncertainty. But then I think as the weeks progressed, then you kick back in and you start making plans, and you became very, you know, focused and ready for when we were going to be able to open again. So I think there was like, and probably there was emotions all the way through lockdown, and we kind of, you know, communicated, you know, a lot before, you know, and you know, we're, you know, socialised and things like that. But we met in the early stages of lockdown by accident in Tesco.
Just it was accidental. He was buying a paper, I was getting a coffee or something like that.
Yeah, and from that we chatted, and then we said, you know, we should actually meet up a couple of times, and that's how the whole lockdown
sometimes
conversation.
It ended up in 2 hours or something.
Yeah.
Because I really, you know.
But I mean, how did you feel about it?
I'm not as emotional as he is, right? I'm hard, but I can't worry about things, but I always think to myself, the antidote to worry is action. So right away, by writing things down, and right at the beginning I was better than I was at the end, to be honest with you.
Right, okay.
And again, I never thought it was going to go on so long. For some reason I thought it was going to be longer than 3 weeks, but I never thought it was going to be long. And maybe it never hit me until later on, to be honest with you. But then I think the very fact that we were talking about it and we were planning, and then we were getting information from our relevant sources, you did start to feel stronger, you did start to feel more confident. I think, although there was still an element of unknown, there wasn't the same amount of unknown as there was at the beginning. And once you found out that you were going to get supported financially and that our businesses would be able to be resurrected again and that they were just paused rather than, totally shut down, then, I think we started to feel better about it. And I think also another thing that we were kind of reminding ourselves was that this was a time that we would never have again. So we should look at the positive aspects of it, and things like the fact that as we were running or walking or sharing through Kirkcaldy, we started to notice things about Kirkcaldy
that I certainly had never known before.
No.
You know,
and I just by accident or organically, I started to stick a thing up on this is Kirkcaldy. And I remember the first time I just put this is Kirkcaldy because I always like have a heading. And then I started thinking, there could be like a series of things here, and we all remember that just at the bottom of Nicholl Street. There's a bench there because we're always looking for a different place to sit, and there's a plaque telling you a little story, and it was all over. And maybe it's like that in other towns, but I really don't care the same about other towns. I care about Kirkcaldy. Even though I'm originally from Hairdre, I care more about Kirkcaldy than Hairdre.
And comma.
But no, I lockdown had its gifts as well as its curses, really.
One thing I did like about, because before I approached you two at Cupcake Coffee Box that morning, I'd seen your social media posts, and I'd seen the way that you were talking to each other and supporting each other, and you were putting up positive messages all the time, and giving people advice on not dyeing their hair and things, that
paid off, didn't it?
Yeah,
that did. I'm surprised. By the way, I never thought it would pay off as much. I don't know about you, but I've had hardly any disasters colour wise.
Absolutely.
A couple of people have put stuff on their hair, but no disaster. I've had people cut their own fringes. Men were maybe a bit more went for the clippers. But no, that did help. It did help.
So what was it like? Because you both opened up on the 15th of July and had your first appointment at 1 minute past midnight.
That was his idea.
But you see, I suppose that's the sharing thing. So although I maybe kind of thought of the idea, we've been talking about so many things during lockdown and supporting each other through it and meeting people through it and all the rest of it. So when, and I've met lots of people, we met you through that, we probably wouldn't have had we been going about our lives as normal.
Maybe the Cupcake had a big bit in that as well.
Yeah,
because she never went.
Yeah,
it's a real community place.
Oh, I love that.
So although I sort of thought 1 minute past 12, I never kind of really thought about it was my idea. It was something, and I thought I had to ask.
I felt that it was very nice of him to invite me to do it, because he could have done that totally on his own. It was very nice that he invited me to do it, and it was like perhaps it was like a celebration of that whole period.
Yeah, it was, and I think the fact that we couldn't do any kind of hairdressing, so it was almost kind of a little bit like saying, right, the minute the clock strikes 12, we're free again to start cutting hair. So I suppose that was kind of the idea of it, and it was bizarre in a way doing it. Bizarre isn't the word. It felt a bit strange, having not been cutting hair for all that time, and then in the salon at that time. And I suppose I was also kind of thinking, doing this at exactly the same minute and another part of the time.
Well, you could say actually it's quite historic, because looking back, this is the only time in our history this has happened.
That's true.
Yeah.
I'm glad that we did do it. I wasn't glad we did it, or that he invited me at 7:30 the next morning when I was doing my first client.
I thought, why did I think about doing this? Right, I had about 4 days sleep.
But now that that's it's done and it's dusted, I suppose I could see that it's an archive thing.
It was, yeah, absolutely, and it's something that I suppose it captured people's imagination a little bit as well, and it made people, you know, ask about it and things like that. And you know, a girl who is a client of the salon and she lives nearby.
That was nice.
Yeah, she actually took a picture of the salon at that time with the lights on and everything. Nice. You know, and again, that's just, you know, I think that's another thing that's come out of lockdown is that there's community spirit and people willing to, you know, people wanting to help each other and do.
But you see, I think that is the real thing about kindness. I was brought up in Achtermachte, a small village, and you were just brought up to always say hello to everybody and be nice to everybody. And what tends to happen is people reciprocate. So I would walk up the street and everybody would say hello and be nice to me, which made you feel good. And it was nothing to do with something you read in a magazine or in a book. It was just common courtesy, and it's about being nice to people. And all of this is about being nice to each other. Exactly. And if everybody was nice to each other, how nice would that be?
I know.
Well, what's your thoughts and hopes on Kirkcaldy? Because we've the high street for a while has had a bit of a challenging time of it. There's the diehards that will never stay off the high street, including myself, because I love it. What's your thoughts on Kirkcaldy and hopes for Kirkcaldy?
I'll let Dom answer this. I've got, because my views have changed a lot about it as well in this last 4 months. But
I mean, I've got a wee bit of history of being involved in. I went to Kirkcaldy High Street. I never managed it, but I was involved in it, and I was first involved in the Kirkcaldy Town Centre management with different chair people. And when Sunil Varu was the town centre manager and trying to get bids off the ground, and I never even heard of bids before, business investment districts. I remember going down to London with Sunil and seeing other areas in London that had bids and they were making a tremendous difference, and I had a great belief in that. The unfortunate thing about it is you've got things like boards of people and you've got councillors and all that. I'm not into that, and from our previous conversation you get that. You're right-brained, no left-brained. But there's a place for right-brained people and the ideas about town centre. So anyway, I feel that too many people in this town, and probably people are like this about their own towns, irrespective of what town, are a bit negative about Kirkcaldy High Street. But you know, they were like that 10 years ago, when we still had Marks and Spencers, and we still had Tesco's, and we had a Debenhams that we thought was going to stay open, and a lot of the shops were open. We had people that still said, see this high street, and complained about it then. So that part of it hasn't changed. However, what I think is there's certain facts that people have to remember about Kirkcaldy High Street, that it's the longest high street in the whole of the UK. And you'll never fill every shop, and particularly now you won't fill every shop. So a high street has to become a town centre, and there's a difference, because a town centre can have a community. It's High Street used to be a place that you went to shop. If you ask people why did you go to the High Street, you went to the shop, and yes, you met people. Well, you could still meet people, but now it's a place to live as well. And I think unless you have that, it's not going to move forward. And I think the unfair thing, and this is, I'm not going to go on, because I could go on for hours about Kirkcaldy High Street, because I think it's got a load of potential.
It does.
I love Kirkcaldy. I think since we've walked through it so much, and I'm back living it and again, because I missed it, it's got that wonderful seafront, and we'll see what happens with that. People have been negative about, oh, why did they waste money on that? Well, I always think to myself, well, if you're saying that, why did you waste money on it? What were you going to spend it on then? Where would you spend that money? Or you get some in the Fife Free Press where people say, you know, they should drop the rates. In fairness to Fife Council, and I'm not, there's plenty of criticisms if I've got that, they have dropped the rates. Lots of people are paying half the rates they were paying before, but nobody corrects that. So people still keep sending in the letters saying drop the rates. So or why don't landlords drop the rents? Well, I mean, I'm a landlord and I'm a landlord for Amy King along at Tollbooth Street.
Yep.
And I certainly, as far as I'm concerned, for the size of that building, I don't charge her a lot of rent. I should tell you that herself. So, and I'm sure there's other landlords like that. So it's a bit of misinformation, and people having the same criticisms which aren't founded, really, or unfounded.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that 1,000 times that they've dropped the rate story. You know, it's
If you
this
take somebody like
misconception.
Marks and Spencer's never took a dislike to Kirkcaldy. As far as I understand, British Home Stores was more profitable in Kirkcaldy than the British Home Stores in Dundee.
Wow.
Marks and Spencer's was more profit in Kirkcaldy than it was in Dundee, but they still shut it because these people have their plans and they have their headquarters in another location and they don't have their heart in the town that they're always in. But I think Kirkcaldy's got a lot of things going for it. I think if you look at it during lockdown, and we walked down that high street was buzzing. Why was it buzzing? Because you didn't have to pay for parking and you didn't restrict cars coming through. And on the 3rd of August, they will start to charge for cars again, and they will send the traffic wardens down to push people away again, rather than having ambassadors going down there who would guide people and manage things and help people. So the potential is there. It's been shown through lockdown, and they should not think of ideas to push people away and go back to what they used to be. We're not going back to what we used to do. We've learned from it.
I know, and do you know, and I think, I mean, I've been born and brought up in Kirkcaldy, and obviously I remember Kirkcaldy as a young lad in the 70s, and you know, a teenager in the 80s, and yes, okay, it was, but it was a different time, and people are doing different things. You know, trends have changed. You know, in every way. You know, so you know, so high streets now are having to change, and I think what I've found, you know, especially in this 4 months, is the community spirit that is there. So take something like the cupcake, you know, coffee box. There is a real community, and there's a whole lot of people who are part of the culture of that coffee shop.
Yeah,
you know, and it's unique. So I think, for me, you know, I used to always think, oh, I've got to go to Edinburgh, or I've got to go here, got to go there. Whereas now I'm really keen to support things that are happening in Kirkcaldy, because I think if we do support it, it could only grow, it could only become more.
Yep.
You know, and then we can actually have a different version of what we all reminisce about.
That's right.
You know, we can have a new version of that really great time, and I'm quite sure people moaned about what was happening then as well. We hark back to a time, but we've got to move forward and look at what we can create. And it's the people that are going to do it. It's you know, yes, it has to be facilities, but it's the people that drive it and make it happen.
And I think we need to get that kind of support from our council. I think the people who are in the council have to come down the high street, because they don't all do that, and some of them don't even live in Kirkcaldy, and I think that's important. So whatever committees in that get set up going forward, they have to include people from different factions and in different roles, but they should all have one thing in mind: to make Kirkcaldy great again, because it can be, because it is a great town.
It is certainly a great town, and you know what I love about it, you know, it's almost like the cupcake coffee box in a way has become the centre of the high street. You know, it's the epicentre where everybody.
Absolutely.
And I worked previously for Faz down Tollbooth Street.
Oh,
As a counsellor, and I would start my day at the cupcake coffee box, and you wouldn't know everybody's name, but you've seen, and I think that's.
And again, that's it. Because we talked about culture. That's the culture that Mike and Simon have created.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Getting people to, absolutely.
So 100 years from now, one of your descendants is listening to this and listening to your voice. What would you like them to know about you?
Do you know, it's maybe actually better that we actually answer for each other, maybe.
Please.
Because, well, certainly, you know, what I think people should know about Dom is, I think, is his passion and commitment for anything he does. So obviously I've known him for his hairdressing, and I think he always wanted to do something that was different from what was expected at that time. And I think he was always doing something that, you know, people generally had to go to a city for, right? So he was bringing that, you know, to the suburbs, and you were always looking for the next best thing or the thing that's different. So I think that's one thing. And I also think his humour and his the way that he how he is keen to share things with people. And I think, you know, and I think that what you share things with people and how you teach and educate people, I think is something that is because you could probably look at most of the salons in town and they've had some connection with Dom somewhere along the line, you know, through training and development and things. And I think that, you know, I suppose is a little bit of a legacy that Dom's leaving, that he's had all these people that he's worked with and that he's trained and educated, and they've gone on to, you know, to develop that in lots of different ways. You know, people that, you know, hairdressers that went down to London and became very successful in things. All, you know, Migele, you know, sort of camp, you know, and I think that's something really to be proud of. That, you know, so there is a true example of sharing knowledge and giving that to people and allowing them to grow and fly and do their own thing. And that's certainly how I feel. Don't feel I necessarily would have done all the things that I've done if it wasn't for the training in the background and coaching and guidance and things that I got from him. So I think in 100 years' time, I think I think it's the legacy that you've left within your hairdressing and the opportunities that you've given people.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. Maybe I should get emotional now. So that's a good way of looking at it, because it's kind of difficult talking about yourself. What I would say about Ronnie is that, and I'm being honest here, that he has probably been the most enthusiastic, passionate, honest and hard-working employee I ever had, which is probably why today he's my friend. And I always say to him, I think that I always seem to have these ways of looking at things. And one of the things is that I say that I've got, you could say you've got loads of friends. You know, you've got people that say, oh, this is my friend, that's my friend. I always think that I've got an inner circle of friends that I could share anything with, and certainly he is one of them. But that's from the point of view of our friendship, right? That's not something you're going to look at 100 years' time. What I think is, I admire the fact that very early on, Ronnie, when he started his own business, he had the attributes that you need to run a successful business. He used to say to me that, I remember, I think it was at your 20-year anniversary or whatever of your business, he said his mother used to tell him something, and it was, oh, stop moaning, just get on with it. And that's what, that's exactly what he's like. And yes, it's true, but that's probably because of the amount of time I've been in business, the amount of time I've been on this earth, that I have trained a lot of people. But by the same token, he's done the same thing. He's done the same thing for the amount of time that he's been in business. I think the other thing about him is he's extremely generous. He's more generous than me. Sometimes I say he's too generous, but people would always say that about him. And the other thing about him is he cares about people's feelings. He really cares about people's feelings. He would feel he has empathy more than anybody else I know. He feels what they feel. Sometimes I've got to calm him down with that, but it's true. And I think another thing is that when I first worked with Ronnie, I thought that Ronnie was, I thought because of his passion that he would develop, and I thought it was more passion he had than natural creativity at the beginning. But he's actually, as times went on, he's continually impressed me how creative he is actually. That's another thing.
Yeah.
I can't think of one negative thing to say about that man. I could only think about
It's been recorded.
No, but seriously, no, that's what I do believe that. I just think he never gives up. I think that's maybe a thing that we've got in common. We never give up,
No.
and we just push forward. And that's it, really.
Thank you, Ronnie and Dom, for holding the space.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Lisa. Thank you.
Yeah.